All right, welcome folks. I'm going to get the recording started and we're going to kick this meeting off. Again, this is the first monthly chapter presidents and advisors meeting for the Texas Master Naturalist program in 2021. If you are new to the chapter advisor and chapter presidents meeting, if you are new to leadership, we'll talk about the different structure of the meetings here in just a little bit, just to kind of set a base for us. But at the time, if you guys will go ahead and mute yourselves, you can turn your video on throughout the presentation if you want to, but just to help with meeting audio quality, go ahead and mute yourself now. Introduce yourself and your chapter in the chat room. And then Michelle will be monitoring chat when I'm speaking. Oh, the things are on. Hold on. I'm going to have to do this just real fast. Hold on. The transitions are all off.
Well, she's working on that. I'll explain what's going on. So we had our presentation, we've kind of built upon it, and it's on auto transition. So we're going to take the auto transition off of that right now. As we're getting started, if we could have a volunteer, anyone from that's on today who would like to be our volunteer note taker.
Is there a volunteer for taking notes?
If there's not a volunteer, we will not have notes. So
I can do it.
Pearl, I can do it. Michelle.
Okay.
Go ahead. Emily, have you done it before? I've done it before.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, either way.
Rock, paper, scissors.
I was going to say rock, paper, scissors. You know what? I'll get it.
I'll vote for Emily.
Yeah, that's fine. Let me get my notes open. Hold on a second.
thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Emily. Really appreciate
Thanks to everyone who volunteered.
Yes, appreciate it. So with the notes, we will share this slideshow. We will share the notes that Emily's graciously taking for us, and then everything in the chat as well. And then we're also recording these chapter presidents meetings throughout this year. So we'll share those recordings. I try to have those up by the end of the day after that meeting. Sometimes it doesn't happen until first thing tomorrow morning, but those all of those will be shared as soon as we have them available. So again, just one more time, if you guys will mute yourselves, otherwise I'm going to mute you, and then we will get this going here. So we have quite a bit to go through today. This is our agenda for today's chapter presidents and advisors monthly meeting. We are going to start with talking about kind of laying the groundwork for what a chapter presidents and advisors meeting, the structure of those. And we're doing this at the beginning of this year because many of our chapters transitioned to leadership. Not all of our chapters transitioned leadership over the New Year's. Some of you guys were able to join our last meeting in December, and some of you, this is your very first one. So it's good to just go ahead and set a standard, set a base for what these meetings are going to look like. We pull the contact lists for our chapter presidents meetings and advisors, and it's chapter presidents and advisors are both invited, but I short term it and I always call it president's meeting. So I apologize if I'm leaving advisors off. It's just a mouthful of words. I will pull that list, the contact list from VMS, from the director's toggle. Michelle's going to show you exactly where that is here in just a second. So if I miss your email address, that is something that needs to be updated within your chapter's VMS role. And again, Michelle will talk about that here in just a second. We are going to try to keep these all of these meetings to 1 hour. Trying to be good stewards of your time. However, we have gone over an hour in the past, especially those months where there's just a lot going on. And we'll try and let you know ahead of time if we plan on meetings being over an hour long, or if we anticipate them being over an hour long. We will announce them monthly and send you an email reminder at least a week to 2 weeks in advance, depending on how quick I can get that email out. But again, we will be recording and sharing that recording afterwards. And they are scheduled on a monthly basis, so you should have the following month's days in your calendar already. We talked about notes, chat, and slides will all be posted afterwards as well. And then quite a lot, there's follow-up items that I say throughout the meeting, and I'm going to email you this afterwards, and I will have a follow-up email to you afterwards usually by late that afternoon, if not the next morning, following the chapter presidents meetings, at least by the next morning. And then something that we haven't talked about, but many of our chapter presidents from last year took into account, is that this meeting can count for 1 to 2 hours, depending on how long it is, of volunteer service. You would log that under chapter/program administration.
Just depend on how long our meetings last. So up to 1 to 2 hours.
Yeah. And then, like I mentioned earlier, those we do have the meeting scheduled for the entire year. And we have 5. By the time you get to the end of the year, everything shifts just a little bit. We are going to try and hold these on the last Monday of the month, or we will be holding these on the last Monday of the month. There is no July meeting. We will group July and August to a summer August 9th meeting. October will be held, the October President's meeting will be held at the annual meeting, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then November, December, we moved up a week in order to account for the end of the month holidays for both of those months. I hope that makes sense and it's clear as mud for y'all, but that's where we're at with the chapter presidents meetings. And then Michelle, you want to talk about updating the contact lists?
Yeah, and just before we move on to the contact list, it's our intent to keep these meetings at the 1 o'clock hour. So on those dates, 1 till,
1 till
about 2
Central
o'clock.
time. Yep.
So one of the things, if you could help us with, is in order to get the information that we have to you and meet with you, we need to know that we have the right context in the right year. Where we gather all that information is from our VMS system. One of the things that we are asking you to do, and we have been asking your chapters to do, is to update your officers list in the VMS, and that's something your VMS admin can help with. There are 2 things to remember, certainly at this time of the year. One is we want to make sure you have all of your new officers all of your current officers for 2021 updated in this VMS list. And then we also want to make sure that you've archived your officer list from 2020. And years past. In order to update your contact lists, I've pulled some screenshots here, and you're likely not the admin for your chapter in VMS, but this can at least give you some talking points of, or you can share these slides afterwards with your admin if they need help. But I've used the Alamo area chapter and Martha Cray here as an example. Martha, if you're on, thank you for being our example here today. But it's under the user defined tab. So when you first get into VMS as an admin, go to our user defined tab in the general group there. Thank you for mousing over that. And then you'll look for TMN officers and committees, the item that's in gray there. Click on that, it'll take you to this next picture below it. And that's where Martha, using the example of Martha in her chapter, she was the president in 2020. So you would select that per person, you would select what their office is. On the left-hand side of this slide, we pull officers, committee chairs, and committee chairs and directors based on what is outlined in our chapter, our CMOP and chapter management, the chapter policies and procedures manual. And so these are on the left-hand side where you see officers, directors, standing committees, and ad hoc committees. Those are the items, the contact lists that we will pull. Those are the designated and official titles. And it would really help that you keep using the titles that are identified for your officers and committees that are identified by the policies and procedures manual, because these are the titles we will communicate with. So we won't be pulling contact lists by any other name other than what's listed here.
Okay. Next on to COVID guidelines, which feels like we're doing the time warp again with COVID guidelines, and Bernie's decided to join that one too. So covering the TMN program COVID safety and response guidelines, we sent this out last week, and I can't even tell you what day last week we sent it out. And it is posted on our website as well. And Michelle, if you'll drop that link, there you go. It is a 2-page document, 2.5-page document that has the updated TMN program guidelines for the foreseeable future. We do not have an end date for these. And these meet both Texas Parks and Wildlife and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension guidelines. And I'm going to read each of the 4 bullets just so that we're on the same page. And then on the next slide, I've got some open discussion that I want to have with you guys. So our guidelines for all TMN activities is to know and follow all federal, state, county, and local guidelines before conducting TMN activities. Beyond these, TMN program will have the following guidelines. Virtual meeting platform tools should be used whenever possible, which we know many of you are already doing and engaging in with your chapter monthly meetings, your board meetings, your training classes, committee meetings, and so on, project meetings. Number 2, for any indoor activity that does occur in person, both volunteers and public participants must wear masks. The occupancy limit shall not exceed 1 person per 100 square feet of indoor public space to allow for 10 feet of social distance. For outdoor activities, both volunteers and public participants must wear masks and social distance by at least 6 feet. Number 4, all multi-county TMN chapters must consider each of their county's health ordinances when scheduling in-person, face-to-face events or meetings, the ability or inability for chapter membership to attend, and the equity of scheduling events in certain counties to the exclusion or inclusion of certain segments of the chapter. I'm going to specifically talk about number 4 here. So number 4 is one that we have struggled with, and number 4 is one that Michelle and I, as we wrote it, we said there's a number of questions that we have about number 4, and we want to have this discussion with you guys. One of the things that has been made difficult with COVID guidelines coming out on county levels and following local ordinances is that they change from county to county, and many of our chapters, over half of our chapters, are multiple county chapters. So how do we inclusively host a training or an outreach event in one county and encourage our membership from other counties to travel to or from that county to attend? And how does that work into health and safety guidelines to prevent transmission spread when you're encouraging travel to or from a county? Now, we can't control and we cannot restrict your travel as volunteers, but it is something that we want you to consider, or we want you to think about. Do you have service projects accessible in each of your counties where your membership lives? If you're a multi-county chapter, and you have, are you making volunteer opportunities available for those in all of your counties, or at least the majority of your counties where your membership lives, so that you're not forcing, or there's not a force, but your membership doesn't feel like they need to travel to a single county or to a county that they don't live in to accomplish their volunteer service. How does this work with expanding membership or diversifying reach? I was just on the phone last week with Bert Stabilikovich from Coastal Prairie chapter. He was talking about wanting to increase his membership, diversify his membership to other counties within his multi-county chapter. And how do you expand and host new projects in counties when we're trying to think about that equity of travel and potential disease spread between counties, travel to and from counties? And then at the end of the day, is there a solution for this all? I doubt that there is a single solution at this point for where we're at. But these are all things, all of these questions are things that Michelle and I have struggled with, and we want you to consider. Point number 4 is that we want you to consider and have a discussion with your chapter leadership about how your chapter is functioning within the realm of ability for members to earn their service, and the equity of hosting events or service projects in certain counties or in all counties that you might have. Michelle, do you have something to add to that?
Nope.
Okay. I'd love to hear if there's any feedback from anybody that has read through this and has a question or has a working solution that you have been able to find for.
I think our next slide has kind of we're capturing the questions, right?
Yes.
So one of the things we wanted to do with you today is we know that the latest update of the guidelines may present some questions for you. And we wanted to be able to capture those here. And we will capture them live on the slide. We may not be able to answer all of them today, but we wanted to capture them here so that we can have them all in one place and get some answers back to you after the fact, and after we have more information, if there are some questions that still need to be answered based on the guidelines. And then also, if you have some solutions to that you've tried and worked to the other items on the previous slide, and we can jump back and forth to these two slides. If you have some things that have worked and that you've tried and they've worked well, we'd love to hear your thoughts or hear your examples on those.
Michelle, this is Mary Jane Brown with Llano Estacado. And we had a meeting on Thursday when these guidelines came out. And what I talked to in our chapter is on the first page, that third paragraph, that I emphasize that the volunteers are further encouraged to evaluate their own comfort, risk, health, and safety when considering meetings and volunteer service opportunities. So I said, we're going to try to do more outdoor where we can maintain that 6 foot. There's no way at the nature center, which has been closed for quite a while, that we could meet there and maintain the 10 feet, 100 square feet distance. But I said, we are going to try to start getting more outside, but go back to that and you evaluate what is comfortable for you. Midland is rolling out vaccines now, and they're trying to vaccinate everybody in that 1B tier. So after that, maybe we can start looking to do more outside, I think, based on what your county's doing with the vaccinations. Because I don't want to admit it, but most of us are in that 1B tier. So at least I am, I'll admit that. But
yeah, I mean, we have 60 to 70% of our entire Master Naturalist membership that is in kind of that age category by age alone.
yes.
And the one thing I want to stress about the guidelines is that first and foremost, we have to follow what our local county governments are saying. Whether your county is closed or any of that, first and foremost. Secondly,
Right.
Beyond that is to keep in mind your own personal comfort regarding meeting beyond when those conditions, when the guidelines or the county governance allows.
Okay, and we are red. So we are at that top level. That's why we haven't really been doing much, but we figure if we can get outside in small groups where we will be really spread out, maybe we can see each other. Our group is really missing that camaraderie.
Yeah.
So, but like I said, I go back to that paragraph, what is your comfort level? You are don't ever feel like you have to attend. So we're going to try to schedule enough outside, maybe later, where we can see each other and be safe. So that was just my 2 cents.
I'm also seeing some chatter in the chat box too. So yeah, first and foremost, you need to follow the guidelines of what your county governance allows. And then beyond that, masks are required statewide, no matter what, indoors or outdoors. and then the comfort level after that.
And then really as chapter leaders and with your leadership team at your chapter level, have these types of discussions with some of these questions that Michelle and I have presented here of how can we make sure that, one, we are keeping our members' safety in mind, but also that we're providing an opportunity for those who do want to engage in trainings or projects and making sure that that's equitable access across these county lines if you're a multi-county chapter. Are there any other questions that we can add to this? What operating questions do you have?
Yeah, in addition, this is Jerry Betty Elmfort. In addition to these guidelines and the government guidelines, AgriLife also notified us of some guidelines, and there's some documentation required, a checklist, and then an individual screening list that needs to be signed and submitted to the office. Has anybody else seen that?
Yes, sir. So AgriLife Extension requires a preparedness plan and COVID screening documents for programs that work with their local county extension agents. So about 2/3 of our chapters work closely with county agents. Some of our chapters do not work closely with county agents. So depending on your relationship with that office, having that additional preparedness plan in place before you host an in-person meeting and following their screening requirements as you're hosting an in-person meeting. So those are just conversations that you need to have with your local chapter advisor from AgriLife Extension. We also noted in the long version of the guidelines that there are other host sites like nature centers that may require a screening or a what's it called, where you write your name and phone number down for tracking, tracing, contact tracing, where they may require an attendance form for contact tracing at some point in the future. So working with your project host sites, your chapter advisors, your AgriLife Extension agents are all important steps as well.
Right. And we're working with our local agents, so that's not in question. I'm just saying that just the administration of trying to get all, because these are like physical signed forms, just the administration of those.
So I have normally seen those at the front door when you walk into a extension office if you've hosted an in-person meeting and as you're walking in the door to that in-person meeting. I've also seen those emailed ahead of time and where you would fill it out, print it at home, fill it out and bring it to that in-person meeting or event.
Right. And these in-person events are going to be like out in the field where people are doing volunteering, working with bird boxes, whatever it may be. So it's not like it's an indoor event or anything like that. I understand it to be all events. Yes,
as long as it's face-to-face. AgriLife has that preparedness plan and the checklist for, I think the COVID screening is for in-person, no matter if it's indoors or outdoors. Did that help to answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Of course. Michelle, are there other questions?
There's one, I guess they're jumping around. Hold on. Is your local government limiting groups working outside to a certain number? Is your local government limiting groups working outside to a certain number, like 10? I believe the CDC guidelines are still right now that gatherings of 10 or less, even outdoors. I think, I don't know.
I'd like to interject if I can. This is Johanna Arndt with the Balcones Canyonlands chapter in Travis County in Austin. So a lot of the cities and counties, as y'all are familiar, are not able to require sizes of groups because of the leadership from the state is not allowing that. And so they have put out guidelines rather than ordinances and requirements. And my reading of the guidelines that you guys sent last week, is that those are considered to be the same as an ordinance. So for example, here in Travis County and Austin, we're in stage 5. So it says that people should avoid any gathering outside of their household. So does that mean that our chapter should follow that guideline as if it were an ordinance?
I'm a little confused by the definition, the difference in the definition between guidelines and ordinance, Johanna. But you should follow your local government's rules, and I'll use a different word, for how to engage in any sort of in-person activity, first and foremost.
So thank you. And the distinction for me is that an ordinance is an actual rule that can be enforced, whereas a guideline cannot be enforced, and it's something that the county and city have put out in the absence of the ability to do something enforceable because of the limitations from the state government. I noticed in the guidelines that you sent out last week that those two terms are used somewhat interchangeably, which I thought was a little bit confusing, but I did see that down further in the document, it defines, hold on, let me pull it up. It says local ordinances are defined as rules or guidelines implemented by city or county government. So it's treating guidelines that don't have any teeth as being a requirement.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go back and check that because I did use those words interchangeably and I did not know that there was a distinction between the two. So I am gonna double check that for you.
Okay,
Mayor
thank you.
Pearl, this is Todd. If I can interject real quick, an ordinance is a legal declaration by a government entity. Anything that AgriLife or Texas Parks and Wildlife issue would be a guideline. We have no government or legal code to enforce it as an ordinance. So what you're seeing, everything that we suggest is a guideline for Texas Master Naturalist.
Thank you. And Todd, Johanna, Todd Sink is my supervisor, so he speaks for the program from state leadership.
Great. But just to clarify though, so that means that our chapter should follow guidelines that are set out either by the agencies that are managing AgriLife or the local county or city government.
Basically, our guidelines sent out from our agencies, AgriLife and TPWD, basically now say you follow your county's ordinance and guidelines. So as long as you follow your local county or whatever, you are following ours.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Could that, like, I know it's already put in writing, could that be put in writing again and made explicitly clear? We're also in Austin, and that's kind of the argument that several of our chapter members have been having. The Travis County suggests or encourages everybody avoid non-essential travel or non-essential whatever. And our members kind of interpret that how they want to interpret it. So some people are out there, they're being cautious, but they're out there. Other people have been locked in their homes still since March. So we're kind of in that same, I don't know, I feel like we're doing our best to follow the strictest guideline, ordinance, suggestion, whatever, but there's still a lot up to interpretation. So I don't know if that can be reissued very explicitly for Master Naturalists or not.
For Master Naturalist, on the very top of that page, it does say must follow all, 2 slides back on the very top, follow all federal, state, county, and local guidelines, restrictions. You want me to put that in bold, Emily? How much do you want me to emphasize that?
So I think our problem is less with, it's less with the way you emphasize. I think our problem is more with the way the county is laying out their recommendations. It's not really a Master Naturalist issue. The more I think about it, it's a county issue.
Yeah, I wish I could tell them what to do. I just don't have that much power yet.
Well, and really it's a state issue because the county and city don't have the power to create ordinances, so they have to only put out guidelines.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate y'all's flexibility and willingness to work with us. We do see these new master naturalist guidelines, using the word correctly, again, to be applicable and effective until further notice. We don't anticipate them changing anytime soon, which will hopefully make planning easier for events without guidelines coming down and changing on a frequent basis from the state. I'm going to move on for the sake of time, but I know there's a little bit more discussion in the chat, and hopefully we'll have time at the end to circle back around to that.
One thing I do want to cover related to this before we move on is that a few of chapters have asked about a screening form.
Yes, I'm sorry, I answered one in the chat.
And it's preferable that you use the one that Extension already has. Don't go creating your own. In that those are on our website. So please use the one that is on our website, or that it will be on our website shortly.
I didn't get to that on Friday. It's on my list to do. So I'll post those here in just a little bit to share with you guys. All right. Okay, Michelle, do you want to talk about moving forward and planning for 2021?
Yeah, so if any of you were on our call for our first kickoff for the TMN Tuesday advanced training events, one of the things we talked about is kind of like the big things that we're working on in 2021. And they're all kind of adaptive management type items. Our program big planning areas where we're looking at for 2021 is we want to effectively use our virtual communication lines, meetings like this, where we can use these meetings to get information out to you in a faster manner. Because as you have seen, so much changes on a daily basis, monthly basis, week to week. We are trying to use our virtual resources to get that information out to you as fast as we can. One of those is our monthly chapter presidents meetings that we're doing here. And then really the first one, if in the future we can, the primary place we want to direct you for questions and content and information is our website, our statewide website. And all of the information that we would be sharing with you in the president's meetings and all of the information that we have to get out to you, it's our major effort is to put everything on the website first and foremost, so that it gives you a conduit to go there first. If there are questions that you're trying to answer at your local chapter level, the information is on the website. Other areas that we're trying to work on in 2021 is we want to increase our virtual-based instruction and engagement opportunities. Meeting platforms like Zoom, our WebEx platforms, and other teams, those things weren't available to us before the pandemic. And once the pandemic hit, we have all these new resources available to us now. And so we want to put them to the best use possible. And some of the things that we're doing is in 2021 is our virtual volunteer fair. That first virtual volunteer fair that we had in 2020, we had over 700 people attend that. It was so popular. We're doing it again in February of this year. And we're under various return to service and various virtual meeting guidelines, and that these virtual opportunities are going to be very important for our program even in 2020. So we have our virtual volunteer fair we're doing, our TMN Tuesdays, which we'll talk more about, our advanced training that we're offering from the state office on current content throughout the year. So your Master Naturalists your members could get all of their advanced training by attending a TMN Tuesday throughout the year. And then our 2021 meeting, we don't know what that looks like yet. We'll talk about that in a minute. But hopefully utilize. The 2020 meeting was so successful over a virtual, the virtual opportunity that we want to move forward with various elements, virtual elements for the annual meeting in the future. And then another effort that we have is increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the program, continuing that conversation at your chapter level, at our state level, and looking for ways that we can continue to implement new ideas, new resources for increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion across all efforts of our program.
Okay. Michelle?
So some of this I've covered a little bit, but this is what 2020 looked like for us. Both Mary Pearl and I were working from home with our little coworkers here. And to be honest, our little coworkers are our little coworkers on and off, even in 2020, 2021. So I've already had 2 weeks this year where my kids were back to being my coworkers again and doing virtual learning while I was sitting next to them on the sofa doing work from home. And I expect that the rest of the year may be various versions of this moving forward. Our capacity to do new and do more at the state office through the state office is very limited. Even before the pandemic, it was limited, but even more so now with all of these things going on. One of the conversations or things for you to think about as presidents over the next year is what do we drop in order to take on these new tasks, and what gets less attention over the year in order to still be successful, have a successful program, and meet the needs of your chapters and our members. Know that replying to emails there's a longer wait time in replying to emails. There's 50 chapters, and each time we get a new chapter, the email traffic exponentially increases. So how can you help? I mentioned that we did a big revamp of our website in 2020. And we are trying to make the website the one-stop shop for everything, the place to go to get information. So much of the communication that we receive from members and from some of the leaders at the chapter level, the answers can be found on the website, or the majority of the answers can be found by reading the CMOP and the chapter policies and procedures manual. One of the ways you can help us is by researching, becoming familiar with that information, becoming familiar with what is on the website, and also helping direct our our members, the entire membership, to those resources. There are a couple of things that we have. In addition to the website, we have a chapter events calendar or from the state office. And then we also have our Master Naturalist statewide listserv. So in addition to things being put out on our website, we try to get other things out through our listserv, announcements on advanced training opportunities or seminars that are coming up, just other resources that are pertinent to Master Naturalists statewide. So we send that information out through our listserv. And let's see, I've got one of the links, you can sign up to be on the listserv. If you as a president already are not on the listserv, we'd encourage you to get on that. And we'd also encourage you to have your members sign up. New class trainees and members who are not already on the listserv, encourage them to sign up too.
Yeah. And so some of the things that you'll see on the listserv, we're going to talk about next. We're going to shift into talking about the TMN Tuesdays. Michelle, do you want to keep going? You're on a roll.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh.
So TMN Tuesdays was Okay, so TMN Tuesday is one of our new projects for 2021, and it was a way for us to be able to provide advanced training for all of our statewide members, but also for us to be able to focus on different areas of interest and highlight and kind of make a big deal about some of those things that we've talked about on here at the chapter presidents meetings, but encourage a larger audience to attend. And so TMN Tuesdays kicked off last month. We had, what was it, 400 folks attend last month, which was phenomenal.
497.
497. They will be held on the second Tuesday of each month. They will count for advanced training. And we will have featured speakers and groups hosted throughout. We do have Dr. Doug Tallamy scheduled for next month, and I'll be sending out the listserv announcement with the registration link for his presentation tomorrow on a Tuesday. Makes sense, right? So we are going to put that out tomorrow for Dr. Tallamy, and I've got something I want to show you about his presentation here in a second. On this slide specifically, I want to ask for if you have anybody that you want to recommend. We want to focus the March 9th TMN Tuesday on diversity, equity, inclusion. We've got a few speakers in mind, but if you have heard any fantastic speakers on DEI that you want to share with us, we are still kind of pulling that presentation idea together. So if you have any additional speakers that we should consider as we're putting the March 9th diversity, equity, inclusion presentation together, please drop those in the chat for us. We greatly appreciate that. Some other ideas that we're going to go down that have been shared previously, highlighting chapter projects that have been innovative, especially during COVID, Junior Master Naturalist panel presentation, board leadership retreats, new training class ideas, online virtual service, or regional coordinators. And if you have any other suggestions or ideas for a TMN Tuesday presentation or a speaker that we should look into, again, please share those so that we can put those on the list. One of the questions that I've gotten multiple times is, why won't you schedule the entire year right now so I know who's talking in December? We are intentionally trying to drive you crazy. We are intentionally not scheduling them, but about 3 months in advance. And that has to do with how crazy and pivoting and all of the changes that happened in 2020. We are intentionally keeping these loose on about 2 to 3 month in advance schedule, so that if there is a hot topic or a hot presenter or a topic of interest that needs to be addressed quickly, we can at least get to that within a timely fashion. So I know that is driving the planners and the type A personalities of Master Naturalists crazy, but it is intentional, I promise. We will get you the information for the presenters as soon as we can. And we've we have shared the save the date out there, but all the dates are where they're going to be. We will be hosting them at the noon hour. We'll be recording them as well. And then one of the other things that we're going to do is Addison Regeneter, who's our graduate student intern, has created a easy drop newsletter page for you to include in your chapter newsletter. This PDF with all of its links and information on the upcoming month's presenter is going to go out tomorrow with tomorrow's announcement as well. So you can anticipate having one of these for each month to be able to incorporate into your chapter newsletters. I will try to have it to you at least by the previous month, knowing that every chapter has kind of a rolling chapter newsletter deadline. I did not get that done this month because this was new for us, but I'll try to have March's to you at the end of Tallamy's talk or within that week. That's the plan. Anything else, Michelle, on TMN Tuesday?
We're covering guidelines in another slide, right?
No, we switch into virtual volunteer fair.
One quick question about TMN Tuesdays. Are those open to anybody?
Yes,
Like
yes.
friends and colleagues?
Yes, open to the public for sure. And I'm sure Ptolemy's talk is going to be well received outside of the Master Naturalist group as well. Michelle, did you have anything else you wanted to add on?
No, we'll cover it in an upcoming slide.
Okay. So while we're talking about virtual engagement and virtual opportunities, we do have our virtual volunteer fair coming up in just a few weeks. One of the emails that I have drafted right now to send to you guys this afternoon is the official registration announcement for a virtual volunteer fair. We've told you to save the date so far, but we finally have the agenda put together. And I'll be sending you the agenda and the registration link for those 2 days here in just a little bit by the end of the day today. Attending live will count for volunteer service, and we're putting together a VMS guide for that, and that'll be on the website. If not today, by the next couple of days, and we'll let you know when that goes live. They will be recorded. Watching the recording is not part of the state exception for volunteer service hours. And then again, registration is opening soon, and the agenda is actually going to be shared here by email. I didn't get it shared to you guys earlier, but we've got presentations running back to back all day Wednesday, not all day, all morning Wednesday and all morning Thursday. And we hope to, again, I'll send this officially by email in the next couple of hours.
Yeah, you're getting I just text Chad, you're getting a sneak peek of the agenda right now.
Yes.
The way we've kind of
an email drafted, going to be sent as soon as I get off this phone call. Oh, you want me to talk about the catalog?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to get 2 emails about virtual volunteer fair this week. You're going to get one, let me pull this up. I didn't have it ready. You're going to get one with the skeleton agenda, which is what you just saw, that had the times and the presentation information. Can y'all see that, Michelle? The Word document?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other document that we're working on that I have drafted and we're just going through to clean up right now is our catalog. Our catalog is going to look a little different than last year's catalog. We'll have the agenda in here, but then we've tried to pull out a few things, and I need to make a little bit of a legend for this. But we will have presentations with specific ecoregion designations or chapter designations. For example, the George W. Bush Presidential Library Native Texas Park is looking for a docent, and that's a presentation that you'll hear at the virtual volunteer fair. But that is a site-based volunteer request. And so since that is a site-based, it is local to the Blackland Prairie ecoregion, and that project is only available to chapters within that ecoregion, the North Texas, the Blackland Prairie, Cross Timbers, and the Indian Trail chapter. And so we have those designated on here with the blue. Again, I will put together a little legend of what that means, and that'll also be in that virtual volunteer fair. There's a little write-up about that project. And then we'll also have that additional, this project is designated as a distanced service project, place-based. And so again, we'll have a legend to tell you exactly what all those mean and where they are, but I wanted to show you that this is what we're working on for the catalog. And then we will have I just got the first draft from the VMS team, the VMS guide for logging virtual volunteer fair service. So we'll have that shared as soon as that gets finished up too. Any
show an example of a virtual project as well, statewide virtual project?
Yeah. So we did, and I'll highlight this on the agenda, but there are ecoregion based at the beginning of the day and all totally virtual statewide at the end of each morning. So here's one, virtual interpretive video. Nope, that's not one. I'm getting there. Here it is. Nature Notes contributor. The Citizens Environmental Coalition is looking for a Nature Notes contributor that is open for statewide, anybody across the state. Any of our Master Naturalist chapters from across the state can participate in this volunteer service project. It is designated as a virtual service project, so you do not need to leave your computer to do this volunteer service. That's what those mean. Again, I will put all of that in a legend so that makes more sense than it does right now. But yeah, that'll go out. I'm hoping to get that out Thursday this week. but I will get out to you today these kind of skeleton agendas so that you can get an idea of what's coming and the registration link for those. And then we'll touch base again with you guys on Thursday and send out the full catalog. I talked about this already, but the first sessions each morning will be place-based. The second half of the mornings will be statewide based. We'll have those color coded in the catalog so you can see those easily, what's going where. The VMS team is preparing a how-to visual or how-to guide for logging hours. I just got the first draft of that in my email, I think last night. And so I need to go through that with Michelle, and then we'll get that posted and shared to you as well. And then we had one question that we wanted to pose to you and ask you as chapter leaders, if we were to host another virtual volunteer fair, well, one, have you found them to be useful? If we were to host another virtual volunteer fair, would you want it hosted in the summer months? Thinking that your members would want to get out of the heat and indoors to do virtual service, or would you want it hosted in the fall? Type up in the chat for us. And then would this be helpful if we were to host a third one of these? So I see a little bit in the chat, but yeah, y'all just drop in the chat and let us know if there's any questions on virtual volunteer fair or any suggestions for future virtual volunteer fairs. If we were to have them, we just talked about state capacity and new projects, but feeling like this is something that is of great benefit to y'all.
Mary Pearl, just a quick observation. We have some members that are still working, and these sessions are start at 9 a.m. Is there any way that they can watch this later and get credit?
We can talk about that. They will be recorded. We had not originally considered watching the recordings of the virtual volunteer fair as part of the exception to watching live recordings for volunteer service. Something that Michelle and I can consider for sure.
That question hadn't even crossed our minds. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you for bringing it up.
Michelle, Mary, this is Robert Gaitan with the RGV. On our TMN Master Naturalist program website, it does say that volunteers can earn service hours for attending all project proposal sessions of the virtual volunteer fair, and in parentheses, live or recorded. So that is what we've been telling our members. Okay.
I'm gonna write that down and double check that just to make sure that we're doing the right thing. But what I'll do is as part of our presidential follow-up email that I'll send either this afternoon or tomorrow morning, I'll make a note of that.
And Mary Pearl, same for Coastal Prairie. That's been our policy for the first virtual fair.
Okay, we'll just double check that and make sure, and then we'll let you guys know for sure. Thank you guys for pointing that out. We can't check everything. Can't get everything right the first time, right? Okay. All right, I'm going to keep going if there are no more questions. The next project that I just want to put on y'all's radar, we just talked about virtual volunteer fair in February. In April, the next project that we're going to reopen is our What Nature Means to Me, What Nature Means project. We hosted the video collection project in April of last year, and we want to do a 1 year post COVID or during COVID still. Look at what nature and outdoor access and getting outside and understanding the natural world around you as a master naturalist and what that means to you to de-stress and de-escalate with everything that's going on. So this is the same slide that you guys have probably seen 100 times. We've talked about this and the success of the first iteration, but I just wanted you to be aware that this is something that we'll talk about again, and we're going to relaunch in April to ask your chapter members to submit their videos, easy iPhone video to share with us. And if you're interested, Michelle just dropped the link in the chat so you can watch some of those videos from last year. They're great to watch. Okay, and then as we go down our timeline talking about upcoming events that we're hosting on a statewide level, we do want you to save the date for the Master Naturalist annual meeting that we host each October. But we also want to ask you, so what are we doing? And if you have a crystal ball, please let us know and help us predict the future. But this is kind of where we're at right now, where we're in a little bit of a waiting game to see what prophecy is shared with us, or great insight is shared with us about what's going to happen by October. So we want to ask you as chapter leaders, kind of poll the room, see what you're feeling about with our with a fully in-person annual meeting, a fully virtual annual meeting, or what that looks like. As you're contemplating that, do know that we are planning on sending out a survey to all of our membership in the spring, probably in March, to ask questions about comfort levels and things like that as well. Michelle, you want to talk about hybrid?
Sure. So I put a question to y'all in the chat about, so you tell us in the chat, what are you feeling about the possibility of an in-person meeting in October? What does that feel like to you? Does it concern you some? Does it concern you for members? Or what is a virtual something that might be possible? So we have a little bit of concern about the possibility and capacity to hold a hybrid event, thinking that if there is an in-person event, it's basically our state office would be offering two meetings. One is in person and organizing the in-person efforts of an in-person meeting. And then the other is with the hybrid is offering things that are online. And how do we do that without essentially running two different meetings? We still have the same 2.5 staff that we always do. And so, I'm a little concerned about what a hybrid event looks like for this year, and also recognizing the cost and the capacity to do something like that. It's another thing we have never done before, but it is something that some organizations, some very large organizations are moving to for 2021. And I know there's still a lot of research and investigation we need to do with what a hybrid event looks like. So,
yeah, and then the last point on here too is that we do currently have a contract with the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport Marriott. We do have a contract in place for a fully in-person. That contract was signed 2 years ago, pre-COVID. Missed that cat with that crystal ball at that point. But the hotels so far have all been very open with understanding needing to work with their audiences for whatever may come and what the engagement rules will be in the fall. So we are still investigating our contract obligations and what that would look like. We were able to take our contract from the 2020 meeting and move that and work with that hotel. And so I'm sure that those negotiations are possible with 2021. And we've already started that with the Dallas-Fort Worth Marriott. So they've been pretty good to work with so far, but we still have work to do. So with that, I see a lot of comments on the chat. Michelle, is there anything specifically? I saw Margaret's there. One of the things.
So I'm not, we're gonna have to go through them.
Okay.
There's a mixture of everything. So there's virtual, there's hopefully in person. I like getting together, and then there's hybrid if we can do it. So yeah, a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, there's a lot there. One of the ideas that we've seen is hosting an in-person for smaller groups and then virtual for larger groups. Again, it's just that capacity issue of what that looks like for Michelle and I to be able to manage that in 1 month or in 1 weekend. So again,
I know that typically the host chapter helps you with a lot of logistics. Can you engage some of us and different chapter members statewide to act as a planning committee to help you?
That's a great suggestion, Emily. And actually, I'm feeling guilty because I saw Sharon's comment in the chat. Sharon, I'm so sorry. She's the president of the Cross Timbers chapter. We have not reached out to them yet to start the discussion with the local chapter, because normally they do help us. And normally I'm always emailing them in about November, December of the year until I'm sorry, Sharon, totally dropped that ball, and I will be in touch here shortly.
COVID took over. That's
all the things happened. But yes, I think there are ways that we could leverage our volunteers. I mean, heck, we run a volunteer program. We have volunteers easily accessible. Managing and figuring out what management needs are is another issue as well. So yeah, Emily.
Yeah. And I'm seeing a lot of comments like have in person but live stream. There is a lot of equipment and resources still needed to be acquired in order to do that, in addition to staff. So again, we have 2.5 staff if we're lucky.
And I'm a little bit more optimistic than Michelle. Sometimes I'm a little bit more of we'll see what happens. So we both have to work and come to a final agreement, and then obviously with the hotel and our leadership. But we do appreciate if y'all will continue to drop suggestions in the chat here. But do know that we will have a survey of your chapter membership that we're putting together to send out in late February, early March, so that we can make that decision, hopefully hopefully middle of spring or so. All right, and I just noticed that it's 2 o'clock, Michelle, so I'm going to move a little bit faster so we're good stewards of y'all's time. Go ahead.
So a couple of things to mention about pins. So I've had questions already about how do we get the grit and distance pin, the COVID pin 2020. So as a reminder, this pin will recognize all of our members who logged at least 8 hours of advanced training in 2020 and at least 1 hour of volunteer service. So December 31st we're kind of waiting on the 45-day cutoff after December 31st. So any of our members who volunteered or had service that they conducted on December 31st, they have until February 15th, about that day, to be able to still report it and it be approved within VMS. So after that cutoff day, our state office will pull reports for each chapter. We'll create a list. And then we'll send you the number of pins based on the records in VMS to your chapter VMS admin membership coordinator. So your pins you don't have to order the COVID pins. They will be shipped directly to your chapter based on the data that's in the VMS for your members. We'll send that with a list.
There's a question in the chat. Do trainees who are in training in 2020 get this pin if they have the 8 hours and 1 hour?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the second question is, where will they be sent? What?
To the, I'll need to decide, and y'all can tell me in the chat which would be better. They can be either to your VMS coordinator or your membership coordinator, whoever kind of sends out those pins, but I need it to be the same person across all chapters. So it's either going to be sent to your membership coordinator or your VMS admin.
Looks like overwhelmingly so far the first 4 is membership.
Yeah. So that answers that question. So we'll send it to the membership coordinators.
Okay.
Other pin updates. So the presidential volunteer service pin, those are still in shipping delay. And the 4,000, so everybody that was still needing a pin up to December 18th, if those have been shipped. If you haven't received anything that you ordered up to that date, please let me know. I will ship other 4,000 hour pins that I've received from that time to today as soon as I can get them out here this month. So I only have the $4,000 Dragonfly pin at this point. Presidential Volunteer Service pins are still in the process. And then 2021 recertification pin. These are for your members who have already received their first certification. So recertification for 2021 is our Side Outs Grandma. And those will be available mid to end February. So if you have members that have reached 8 hours of advanced training and 40 hours of service to date from January 1 to February, you can start making your orders for those pins in mid to late February.
Okay.
And well, you don't have to go back, but I'll just mention on that, I recognize that we don't have our our 2021 order form updated on the website yet, but we will work on that and get it updated.
And then looking at 2021 certification, this slide has been shared a couple of times, but these are our, we do not anticipate, this is the same slide that you guys have hopefully seen before. If you're new to the chapter president's role, hopefully your previous president has shared this with you as we announced this in November, December last year. But 2021 certification requirements are, we do not anticipate changing. There have been 2 temporary policies made for basic training and for advanced training. And this is all listed on the website. There's information on this and the details for these policies. They're calendar year based for 2021. And there's more information, again, like I said, on the website. Volunteer service requirements are not changing for 2021 either. So I went fast through that, but all that information.
Just for clarification, so back when we were talking about TMN Tuesdays, and I said we'd cover it in a later slide. So one of the questions we were getting in the chat is, so TMN Tuesdays is the only exception to our advanced training policy where members can watch the recorded version of TMN Tuesdays and receive advanced training credit for. So that's the only exception we have to the video advanced training policy. TMN Tuesdays are the only items, the only recorded items that members can watch and receive advanced training for when there's not a live Q&A offered after.
Okay, that was a lot of words.
Does that make sense?
We do want to talk about board leadership retreats, Michelle, for the sake of time, since we've gone over by a little bit. Maybe we'll push this off to next month a little bit. Or do you want to talk about this?
No, actually, we are running out of time and we've got a couple more things to cover, so that are probably more pertinent right now.
Okay. So many of our boards do hold leadership retreats. If you have an annual or spring leadership retreat, please share any of the goals that you have made with your fellow presidents in the chat. Otherwise, we will talk about this in February, and I'll put this on the agenda for next month to discuss.
And the whole point of discussing it is we want to encourage it for you in your chapter. We want to encourage you to plan one if you haven't already. And we'll add this, like I said, we'll table the conversation about it to our next president's meeting. But we have some chapters across the state who do this really well, and we want to hear from you in the next meeting. So again, if your chapter hasn't planned or isn't planning a board leadership retreat, please consider doing so.
One of the other big timelines that we have is another email that you guys are going to get from me later this week is we are reopening the spring 2021 training form to collect information on who is hosting a spring training. Many of you answered my original request in November for information on your spring 2021 training. And then all of that went out the window when COVID restrictions changed and gobbled everything all up again. So we're gonna press pause and restart and start this over. So I will send this out to you guys later this week with the formal call for information, and I'll send it to CC to all chapter presidents and then all new training class directors as currently listed in VMS so that they can reply with that information.
And Mary Pearl, can you give just a quick overview of what the timeline? So like the end result is we would put together a statewide news release that would go out through our access to outlets that we have through our agencies. So what would be the timeline that
probably
out? And I know some chapters are we'll be starting training here soon. So is there a timeline where they would miss the opportunity to be on the news release or not?
Yeah, so I'd like to have like a 2 to 3 week timeline to turn around and get all the chapters responding. Even if you're in the middle of your spring training class right now and you're not looking for recruits, it helps us to know who is training right now and who's not, so that we can say we have 14 out of the 50 chapters hosting a spring training class right now. Or it helps us to know that this is where our training is occurring across the state. So I'll put a timeline. I did not put a deadline on that yet, but when I send it out, it'll probably be a 2 to 3 week turnaround request. So fairly quickly, hopefully to put the press release out the 1st of March, so that we can advertise for those who are still with the training classes still coming, and then we can emphasize those that are currently in the middle of training class, highlight. Okay, and then one last slide after this one, but our AgriLife bookstore, I finally got it restocked. Y'all, it has been a COVID thing where there was restrictions on getting some of the restock orders in. So I literally just drove 7 boxes and I have to go pick up 3 more boxes to make another trip because they didn't all fit the first time. But the AgriLife bookstore is restocked, will be restocked probably by the end of this week. It takes them a few days to process after I drop boxes off. So there are more items coming soon. Thank you for your patience. And then masks are in best ordered in bulk to save on shipping. All right, and then with our last slide that we have here, again, apologize for going over time today. We will try to keep right to that hour next time. We have a calendar check looking ahead, some of the important dates to look forward to for February. Our spring training plans, our spring planning trains are due on February 1st. I'm going to release that information. Nope, I'm going to have to change that. I'm going to have to change that. I'll change that one. Our virtual volunteer fair is February 3rd and 4th. Our TMN Tuesday with Talamy is February 9th. Our cutoff date for VMS, December 31st reporting, is February 15th. So that's 45 days post the last day of 2020. And our next chapter presidents meeting and chapter advisors meeting with you guys is February 22nd. So with that,
there's one question from in the chat that maybe some of the older existing chapters on the and those chapters that do have board retreats can address. So the question is, what is the difference between a quarterly board meeting and a retreat? The quarterly meetings or board meetings that you have are kind of when you have them and how often are governed by our bylaws. A retreat is generally held at the beginning of the year for your new board, and it's a good chapter management, kind of leadership management thing to have for your chapter to envision goals for the year, help with that successful transition of exiting officer, information getting into the new officer, and kind of coming together as a board so you're all on the same page and moving forward in one concerted effort, working on the same goals and information. I see some people adding in the chat discussing the budget for the year. And usually this is where a lot of the big annual planning things take place, is at your board retreat. And those board retreats somewhat set the tone for your year. your leadership, and the group, and how you will work together for the year. So if there's any other chapters online that wanted to stay and talk about how they manage their board retreats, or for others, we'd welcome that.
Yeah, and then
Michelle,
before we get into that discussion, Bert, I appreciate it. I am going to stop the recording now as we have officially adjourned our chapter presidents and advisors meeting. I know that there's folks that need to get going to other meetings. We thank you guys for joining us for the hour. Y'all are free to hang out and hear this discussion as you need to. But again, I appreciate y'all joining with us, and we will see you at the next chapter presidents meeting February 22nd. So I'm going to stop the recording, and then Bert,